Hello everybody, thank you for joining another Chit Chat Tuesday. I'm really excited to be introducing Ali Norell, and she is an author. She's written inside, and I was going to get the screenshot to come up here now, but I wanted to just show so people know exactly what the cover looks. I hope you can sort of see it without the reflection, the truth inside, and it's lessons for my daughter in the afterlife. Oh yeah, brilliant.
Oh,
So,
yeah. How do I
the
turn
better
that?
shot of it, absolutely.
It's very wonky. There we are.
That's good.
Mm,
Perfect. And I'll get
mm,
you to show it again as people start to come
Sure.
on as well. And Ali is an author. This talk is Chit Chat tonight is about Ali's experience and her book of losing her daughter in 2014, her death of her daughter at 5 months old. So this talk is to give people hope. I've seen Ali before when I worked at the Isborne, and what I really liked about it is that people were so drawn to Ali's kind nature, and also as well is that some people you could see were coming in and they were slumped over with grief, and when some of them left you could just see there was some hope given to them, and some of them I saw walking with a different body language posture when they left after, which I think is so important. So having a little bit of a chat before we start, I did say to Ali, and Ali did say to me, if anybody is going through grief at the moment, please ask your questions. Ali is very, very happy to talk about anything you want, so don't feel you need to hold back at all. Ali will be mentioning words like death and dying, and also I'd like to talk to her about what she mentioned to me before about death cafes. I think I've got the word right there, and how it's important that we also talk about it as well. So please ask the questions. Ali is such a wonderful person. I'm really thank you, Ali, for joining us tonight on
It's a
Exploring the
pleasure, Paul.
Afterlife.
Thank you for having me.
So I just want to say hello to Beth and hello to Leah who are watching. There's some silent watchers as well, so do come on and say hello. So what I'd like to talk about to begin with is, if you're happy, you have said to me before when you've been interviewed, and I've also heard about your experience of Romy
Mm.
and your day with her when you were travelling in the car. Are you happy again to explain that story so people know what happens, and kind of
Of
come where you're
course.
from, so people might feel comfortable to share their stories as well
Yes,
with
yes,
us?
of course. I always say, I talk about my daughter often. I have three other children here, and Romy was the third of my four children. Obviously, I wrote a whole book about the experience of her passing, her dying. I do use the word death and dying. I know that some people prefer to use pass on, but I tend to use that word. Uh, and I have talked often and frequently about Romy's life, her death, and what happened to me after she died. So yes, to sort of give an outline. Romy was 5 months old. She was our third child. We have a son, a daughter, and then there was Romy, and we have since had another son. And on the day before she died, I should point out, we had a completely healthy pregnancy, healthy home birth as it happened. She was an amazing baby. I know I would say that. I would say that about any of my children, but she was particularly, I remember joking, about how good she was. She slept. She was really sunny natured. Everyone adored her. Um, I'm not I'm not exaggerating when I say that I was stopped in the street by strangers many times, just commenting on how beautiful she was, and she had something about her that just drew people. And lots of people will stop for babies, but I can honestly say, and I don't say this with any sort of disrespect to my other children, but there was definitely something about her, She had something. I was with her pretty much every second of every day that she was with us. I was breastfeeding her. We co-slept with her. I used to carry her in a sling, so that actually has given me a lot of comfort afterwards, knowing mean, I've chosen to be at home with all of my children, but with her in particular, I was literally glued to her. I remember, I think my dad saying to me, "Oh my gosh, you're completely obsessed with her," and I really was. So that's something I do speak about in The Truth Inside, when I do refer to the fact that I almost feel like I knew. There's a part of me that knew before she even got here that she wasn't going to be here for very long. There were a lot of strange things about our time together. So on that day, it was the 17th of July. It was a very hot day. She was not ill in any way, perfectly healthy baby. And I put her in the car in the morning. We dropped off my son at school and my daughter at nursery. And the next day was the beginning of the summer holidays, when basically all hell breaks loose in our house. We've got the kids and, you're entertaining them all day. And she was obviously a very little baby. And as I drove, I decided to put her in the car. We decided we were going to go to a cafe. My husband and I have been sort of vaguely talking about moving. So I decided I was going to go to the village we were thinking about moving to and have a look round there and see how it felt, and maybe just go for a coffee or some breakfast, and I could feed Romy and we could just kind of relax. And oddly, as I drove up the road with her, I used to talk to her a lot in the car. And I said to her, well, Romy, this is our last day together. Meaning it was our last day before the summer holidays when her brother and sister would be at home. So that was the first thing that struck me as quite significant afterwards. We went to the village, went to a cafe, I ate, she sat on my lap, and then I went to feed her and she didn't want to feed, which is very unusual. I put her down in her, I had her in a buggy, I lay her down in that. It was such a hot day, it was really uncomfortably hot. So I thought it was the heat that was bothering her. She slept for some time, and then I was just paying the bill and she kind of let out this strange cry that I'd never heard her make before. And so I sort of rushed over. I was a bit concerned, picked her up. She was crying, which was again out of character. Tried feeding her again, didn't want to feed. And I thought, okay, something's not quite right. I'll put her in the car. I'll drive her home and we'll just sit. I'll sit in the shade in the house with her. Maybe that will settle her. And then if that doesn't settle her, maybe I should call a doctor. I was sort of thinking, well, has she got heat stroke? These sort of were the things that were going around in my head. Have I had her in the heat too much? And have I eaten something that doesn't agree with her through my milk, or I don't know. So we got home, and again, slightly strangely, we didn't at that point have a cleaner at all. I cleaned my own home, but because we were considering moving and we had 3 very small children and a cat, I decided to employ the services of a cleaner for about 3 hours while I was out, to just kind of knock the house into shape a bit, in case we were going to put it on the market. And as I came in, she was coming down the stairs, she'd finished, and I said, oh, great, thank you so much. Do you want a cup of tea before you go? She said, yes, please. I went in the kitchen and I was putting the kettle on. Romy, I brought her inside in her car seat. She was fast asleep. She looked fine. I thought, right, I'll just pop the car seat there while I go and make the tea, because I don't want to disturb her in case she wakes up and then I've got to make tea. So left her in the car seat. I was in the kitchen and I heard this odd sound and I couldn't place what it was. And obviously I had another person in my home at the time, so I'm sort of mentally checking, is she doing something? I thought she just finished. Then I thought the cat was being sick in the conservatory. It was a really odd noise, like a rasping noise. And then I suddenly had this feeling hit me, and I thought, that can't possibly be Romy, can it? And I walked into the living room where the car seat was, and I took one look at her, and she was basically blue. It had happened like that. So at that point, I think I must have probably just gone into shock. And I thank my lucky stars that Madeline, the lady who was cleaning, was in the house. Because I think I screamed, or I screamed at her like, oh my, is this normal? Like what's going on? And so she rushed in to help me, and she just completely took over. And I found out 2 things about her afterwards, which again seem significant to me even now. So she wasn't really just a full-time cleaner. She was also an air stewardess. And so she completely just went into, pardon the pun, but autopilot. and was sort of, she put her in the, she was literally like, call 999. She was shouting instructions at me because I'd just frozen, completely frozen. And she told me afterwards, a long time afterwards, because I got in touch with her to thank her, and I said, could you come to the house? I'd just like to, if you could. And she shared with me at that point that actually she had lost her baby daughter at birth about 10 years previously. And I've stayed in touch with her. I've mentioned her, I've referred to her in The Truth Inside. And she's a very special person to me. I barely know her. We don't see each other regularly, but I truly believe that she was meant to be in my house at that time because I know, when, as I'm sure lots of people listening will sort of will empathize with, if you've lost somebody close to you, particularly with a child, but often with other people who are connected to you in a traumatic way, you spend a long time afterwards going over and over and over and over what you could possibly have done to prevent it happening. And I know if she hadn't been there and if she hadn't performed CPR, called an ambulance, told me what to do, I would have put a lot more blame on myself than I did. And I did put blame on myself, even though you could argue, well, come on, a mother will do that. Not just a mother either, I guess, anyone could do that. At that point, I'd been working as a birth doula and a reflexologist specializing in fertility and pregnancy. So I'd worked around babies a lot. I taught baby massage, and I'd actually taken a baby first aid course, not once, but twice. And in the second course, I clearly remember one of the other participants asked the instructor, look, it's all very well learning this, but if this is your own child, you're not going to remember. You're going to be in shock. We're not going to remember to do any of this for our own children. We were all there as professionals working with young children. And the instructor said, oh, no, it's like riding a bike. It'll just come to you. And unfortunately, I can testify, I did that course twice and it did not come to me. I panicked and froze, and I couldn't even think to call my husband. Somebody had to tell me to call my husband and tell him what was going on. That's how, I think they call it disassociation, don't they? I think that's possibly what happened. And I can still, when I think about that now, there's whole parts of what happened that I've blanked. I can't remember. We were then taken to 2 hospitals in quick succession. We were taken to the Royal Sussex County Hospital. I live in Brighton in the UK. We were taken there, where they did scans, and I could tell from the minute we arrived there were a lot. I think there were like 15 medical personnel in the room that we were brought into, and they were all, there was an air of panic, and yet I can remember sitting there thinking, well, she must have epilepsy, she's had a fit, she'll be all right in a minute. That's where my head was at, until the anaesthetist came in and said to me, do you understand that your daughter is seriously ill? And I said, no. What's wrong with her? And I clearly remember at the time I was angry with him because it came out clumsily, but I understand why now. He said to me, listen, if she even survives this, she's going to be severely brain damaged. And at that point, I can remember feeling, this is a weird word to use, but I felt elated. I just thought, oh, okay, well, she's not going to die. She'll just be brain damaged. She'll be disabled. That's fine. We can deal with that. And in my mind, I was going through, well, we'll have to adapt the house, and maybe we'll move. We'll have to take that into account. It was a very surreal experience. And that man did apologize to me needlessly as it happened afterwards. But we were leaving, we were then taken by ambulance to King's College Hospital in London to see a specialist there, because they'd identified that it was a brain issue, but they didn't know what it was, because all the scans were showing that the bleed had been so quick and so catastrophic that nothing was showing up on any scan. They couldn't tell what it was that had happened. So it was all very perplexing. I mean, she had literally been absolutely fine hours beforehand. There were no signs, nothing. And as we were getting into the ambulance, that anaesthetist came and found me, and he said, look, I'm really sorry. Look, we've all got children. And I realised at that point that the 3 or 4 of them that had come out to help us into the ambulance were crying. So it was, we encountered a lot of emotion, a lot of kindness. We were then blue lighted from Brighton to London, which has given me a problem probably for the rest of my life with ambulance sirens. I don't cope very well when I hear them, even now. I'm still working on that. And that's quite some experience, to be sitting in an ambulance for an hour and a half with constant sirens blaring. And then when we got there, we saw this amazing specialist who basically said to me, look, if you'd called me the minute that she made that strange sound this morning, there's still nothing I could do. It's like if I put her on the operating table, like the second you notice something, or the second that you saw her in your living room, this is so catastrophic, we can't do anything. But they tried everything. We were there in the pediatric intensive care unit for the day. We stayed overnight. And then the following day, we knew it was coming. But we had a bit of hope. I think my husband probably had a bit of hope. He had, he was hanging on to some kind of belief that somebody was going to come up with something and do something. But I think I knew from sitting next to her, she'd never regained consciousness since the day before. And just sitting there with her, I could just tell that she had gone, whatever that vital element was that was there wasn't there anymore. I knew my baby, I knew my child, I knew what I don't know if, if anyone has been with somebody as they pass, they will understand that, the minute after your soul leaves your body, you are literally looking at the shell of that person. They do not look like the person that you knew anymore. And it's not just because they're not conscious. There's some essence that leaves us, I think. And that was that. It was shocking. It was traumatic. It was completely unexpected. And it put us into a complete tailspin. I had a lot of faith in the spirit world. In particular, I've been brought up with parents who are interested in spirituality and mediums and clairvoyance. And I had been deeply into all of that. I did a lot of psychic development work and trained as a medium when I was younger, before I had children. And once my daughter died, I didn't really want anything to do with it. I didn't want anything to do with anything. I was literally existing to take care of my surviving children and try to support my husband as best I could. But then a series of events began to happen very soon after Romy died that started to pull me back into that world again.
Thank you, and I am sorry that you went through all that and the family. And I'm going to get at the first part. I'm going to ask Sam if she minds me sharing the second part, because the other one is slightly more personal, and I want to do what is right. I'm trying to find the first part. I don't know if it's gone now. But basically, Sam was saying that she feels guilt. I can't find the original one. Let me know if you're okay for me to share the second one. I know that's such a huge thing. And also as well, you mentioned in your book, and you mentioned in your talks and other interviews you've given about the 5 stages of grief, which would be good for people to know about. But I think the biggest thing, even if it's nobody's fault, even if they did absolutely everything, is the biggest one is the feeling of guilt.
Yes.
If you can talk about guilt and how people can start the healing process through feeling so guilty.
Sure. I think the guilt is very complex, because obviously I'm speaking as a mother, but I'm very aware, my family have also experienced suicide. A much loved member of our family made the decision to end his own life. And thank you. And the person most closely connected to that individual in my family, and this was 10 years ago, it feels guilt to this day, and feels that, they should have and could have prevented it. And I'm sure lots of people would identify with that feeling. I think sometimes in a traumatic situation, there is guilt and this actually applies to me slightly as a mother. I have certainly had situations of feeling guilt that I did that course and then didn't use what I knew, because I still, I'm like, well, I must know it. I must still know it. It must still be in my head, but I did not retrieve that and use it to save my child. And also, to a point, guilt that it was her and not me, even though I wouldn't want to leave my my surviving children. I can't lie. I've had plenty of times where I've thought, well, it should have been me. It's the wrong order of things. You shouldn't be burying your own child. So it's a very complex one to deal with. And what can I say? I indulged in a lot of different types of therapy. In the early days, I was really sort of strongly advised to do that. I'm going to be really honest and say that I guess I probably didn't find the right therapist for me. I tried lots of really different, some quite weird and wacky things, and it just didn't work. For me, I was obsessing about trying to ask the therapist, have you lost a child? Because to me, unless they'd lost a child, I wasn't going to speak to them because they couldn't possibly understand. So the therapy didn't really do it. I think what helped me with the feelings of guilt ultimately was I started to go to my local spiritualist church. And that's a practice that I'd had when I was interested in developing as a medium. And I would go. I was training in London, and so there's an amazing little spiritualist church called the London Spiritual Mission. And anyone who's kind of interested in that world has probably been there to see a demonstration. I saw the brilliant Gordon Smith there many years ago. Interestingly, before I had my own children. Gordon Smith, I'm sure lots of your listeners will know of him. He's a wonderful man. He was known as a psychic barber because up until very recently, he was still working as a barber in Glasgow, and he wouldn't take money for sittings and was exceptionally accurate. And the demonstration I saw him give at the Spiritual Mission, bizarrely, he came immediately to a couple who had lost their son. And I can, to this day, and I've seen a lot of different demonstrations, I can still remember how exceptionally he worked with them and how much hope and positivity he gave them. And so I found myself at this point, we were living in Brighton, that's where we live now, and I found my local spiritualist church, and I just started to quietly go every Saturday. I went once and didn't feel right about it and went home really quite upset. The medium hadn't come to me and given me any sort of message. I just felt really out of place there. And I went home and ranted at my husband for about half an hour about it, and then said, I am never setting foot in one of those places again. And then 2 weeks later, I heard myself say to him, can you be at home with the kids tonight? I'm going to go to the spiritualist church. And he said, oh, what, the one that you said you would never set foot in again. And I said, I can't explain why. I just feel like I need to go there. I don't even really want to go there, but I'm going to go. I've digressed slightly, actually, but this is a lovely story, because I was on the way to the spiritualist church in the car by myself, and I still had a habit of talking out loud to Romy when I was in the car by myself. It was also where I cried a lot. I think a lot of people do that when they're grieving. We tend to cry in the shower or the car because they feel like a safe space to sort of really let rip. And I was talking out loud to Romy, and I said to her, look, I have no idea why I'm going here tonight. And I just, could you try and get some kind of sign to me? I just need to know you're okay. That's all I know. And that's all I need to know. I think I know you're okay because of what I believe. But I'm your mummy, and I need to know that you're okay. That's all. And I got there, I parked, I went in alone. It was packed. I stood at the back. And to cut a long story short, the medium, I remember standing at the back and thinking, she's going to come to me and I'm going to be the third person that she speaks to. I just knew it. And I was the third person that she spoke to. And she gave me some pretty accurate information about Romy's passing. Immediately said, you've lost a child recently. It's a daughter. Was, pretty accurate with that. And, but it was fairly innocuous. She told me I was wearing a locket around my neck with her picture in. These were all things I thought, well, that's good. But, yeah, if I've confirmed I've lost a child, it would be a good guess to say, are you wearing a picture of her? But she then got that I had a lock of her hair in the locket, which I was like, okay, that's pretty good. I had it hidden. And then she said, okay, well, that's all I really have to tell you. And I thought, oh, okay. And she said, well, actually, there's one really, really important thing that I'm being told I must tell you. And I'm being told that I have to use very specific wording. So at this point, I'm thinking, what is it? Is it the meaning of life? Like, what are you going to give me? And she said, it's a bit strange. I can't really interpret it, but I'm just being told I have to tell you I'm okay. And that's probably one of the most extraordinary pieces of information I've ever been given by a medium or a psychic. And, that did help me with the guilty feelings, actually. Just the practice of going to that place once a week. There were other people there who were grieving. We were all sort of looking for something. I've never really thought I was looking for answers, because I think I knew what the answers were really in myself. But there was a sense of companionship. It was okay if you got emotional or cried. Actually, the individual in my family who took their own life, actually, I did receive a message from them on one occasion at that spiritualist church, which was extraordinary and amazing. So that I think that started to help me, because it gave me a focus, and it gave me an awareness, or sort of returned me to the awareness that I'd previously held, that there's something that's a lot bigger than us. And actually feeling, here's how I would translate it: feeling guilty about the loss of a loved one is actually a bit arrogant, because by that we're implying that it's really, we've got a lot of power here and it's all down to us. And actually I don't really think that we do. But for me, it was a ritualistic thing. I went for many weeks. It was a thing that I started to look forward to. And I started to also hear other people's stories. It wasn't all about grief. It wasn't, but obviously you're there wanting to make a connection with people who have died, who have passed over. It was enlightening. It was educational. It was sometimes funny. The people who ran it were actually some real characters. And they played really uplifting music at the beginning to get everyone's energy up. And so, and I took friends with me. Friends found out I was going, oh, can I come with you? And it was the only place that I felt comfortable going, probably for 2 years after my daughter died, other than having to take my children to places. I was really reclusive. I didn't go out. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to see anyone. I was too worried somebody was going to say something that would be upsetting, or I would have to manage somebody else's grief. So that was a real, it really helped me. It really helped me. I haven't been for a very, very long time, but at that point that helped, and it did help with the guilt. The stages of grief that you mentioned, that the person that I should reference there is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is she's an incredible, exceptional woman. She was a scientific woman. She was a doctor, and I believe she was Swiss. And she worked a lot with the dying and became very focused on, okay, what does happen when we die? What happens when we die? What happens physically when our body starts to shut down? But what happens to the essence of us, this part of us that isn't connected really to our body? It seems to detach. And she did lots of work on it. There's I think her seminal work is on death and dying. But she she coined this term, the 5 stages of grief. I believe nowadays there may be 7. I think somebody somewhere has added to them, and I've now put myself on the spot to try and name them. But I think I know. So it's anger, denial, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I think that was the original 5.
I think that's, yeah.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure that's them.
Because I'm just going to read out Sam's here, and also about anybody else who wants to say, anything, if you don't want it to be shared, please say don't share at the beginning of your message, and then I won't share. I think that'd be the easiest way of doing it. I wonder if Janet, you mind if I share your message as well? But Sam said, and also as well, Sam, it was so you know, Ali, it was to do with the hospital made a mistake. So there's also anger in there as well. So Sam said, I tried to save my son CPR and chest compressions, but sadly I couldn't save him doing all that. To my son was horrendous situation. I tried and feel guilty. I couldn't save him. So I think that resonates with an awful lot of people, that they were trying. Is there anything you want to add to that at all before I move that one off? Because you said some great things about, you know, what you did with you know, feeling guilt just now. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that at all, Ali?
Well, sure. I mean, I would really love to say to Sam that I'm so sorry for her loss. Perhaps we could know the name of Sam's son. That's something that's very important to me. You know, that Romy's name is spoken, and so, you know, whether it's shared in this forum or not, you know, I would love to know your son's name, Sam. And I'm so sorry that he's not here with you still. And I hope that perhaps you've had some kind of feeling, or, you know, I do believe that after we die, there is something. I believe that a connection continues to exist, and that's based on the things that I've experienced. And I don't profess to know any more than anyone else. But as one bereaved mother to another, I hope that your son has given you perhaps a sign or something so that you can, even just a feeling, so that you can feel that he is still close to you, because I'm sure that he is. And something that may, you know, you have to be, even I am aware of being very careful in these situations, because a lot of things that we say to the grieving can sound very trite and can sound like we're trying to fix it. And I understand very well that you can't fix this, you know. Sam, you know, you're never going to feel better. You're never going to feel fixed. But you might evolve and you might feel different. And the one thing I perhaps, if I may, would offer you is something that I've told myself many times, which is that, you know what, your son was meant to be here for the time that he was here. And no matter what, you know, this amazing surgeon said to me that, you know, I'm brilliant at my job, but if I'd had her on my operating table the second that something was wrong, I could not save her, because she is not meant to be saved at this point. And that, in a perverse way, has helped me at times. At times it hasn't. At times I've really wanted to throw things against the wall when I've thought about that. But perhaps in a calmer moment, you might feel that you know, however it happened, your son was meant to leave when he left. Somebody once said to me, actually, it was, again, funny, I'm strange that I'm speaking about this. I'd like to name this person, but it's he's not directly related to me, and so I don't feel as I should. But the individual in my family who decided to end his life, I was told by one medium who referred to him throughout one sitting once. He because obviously that's left a lot of devastation and guilt and grief and a lot of really strong repercussions in that area of my family. But this medium said to me that this individual wanted to make it clear to the family that he felt very sad about the decision that he'd made, and that perhaps he might not have made that decision, but that the family should understand that if he had not made that decision, he would have been hit by a bus, or he would have, you know, had a cancer. It was his time to leave. That was a very clear message that I was given. But yeah, I'm sorry for your loss, Sam, and I'm really sorry for your pain, because I'm sure that's an extraordinarily painful situation that you're in. So
I put Sam's next. I do know Sam is a Facebook friend. Harley, I've put the name up, and Harley's seen some photographs. A beautiful, beautiful boy. If you could say to me as well, us, as well, that you say that very enlightened people, when you when you hear about bereavement, say, "I'm so sorry. What was his name? What was just what was her name? What was his name?" The importance of that, and also because Sam did say that she has felt the son heard him calling when she'd been at home. You also had experience of a television being moved that you were just putting down to, I think, either one of your children or your husband to begin with. So if you can talk about
Yes.
that, please, as well.
Yes, of course. So yes, this would have been just a couple of months after Romy died, and I know that actually, possibly not within the group of people that we have here tonight, because I understand you probably have an interest, but I've often felt the need to explain, or to sort of, how do I, not justify, but obviously Romy was 5 months old, and some of the things that have happened, and particularly when I was writing The Truth Inside, I was imagining people would be thinking, well, that's ridiculous. She was a baby. She couldn't possibly have done that. My understanding and my belief is that when we return to wherever it is that we go, obviously we're not, a man, a woman, a baby, a dog. We're a soul. We're a spirit entity, a force of nature, if you will, or energy. So I feel the need to put that in front of this story, because it does sound quite outlandish otherwise. So it was a couple of months after Romy had died, and I just happened to notice, going about the house one day, we had a television at that time that was it was sort of on a stand, and you could rotate it through 180 degrees, and it was on a piece of furniture to raise it a bit higher, because my husband doesn't do DIY and he couldn't fix it to the wall. So over a couple of 2 or 3 days, I remember coming down in the morning and noticing that the television, which we normally had, we had it at the same angle, because it was we had a pretty small living room. It's the only angle at which we could sit on the sofa and watch the screen. So it wouldn't be, we would never have moved it for any reason at all. We didn't watch it from any other position. And 2 or 3 days running, I came downstairs and the television screen was at a really ridiculous angle, like literally like wrenched round on itself. The first day I thought nothing of it and put it back. The second day I felt annoyed. I thought my husband had come, because we had a plug socket that was down the back of this piece of furniture, and I thought, oh God, he's been trying to charge his phone or something, and why couldn't he use the normal plug socket? I was cross with him, because it's exactly the type of thing he would do. Move some obscure piece of furniture just to do that, and then just leave it there. And then the third or fourth day, I thought, well, maybe it's the kids. They were 4 and 5 at the time. They weren't in the habit of, we didn't allow them to come down and put the TV on in the morning, but our 5-year-old, definitely would have had a go if he had half a chance. So I was sort of going through my mind thinking, well, has there been a morning where I've slept in and he could have come? But anyway, didn't think much of it until about the 4th or 5th time it happened. And then I was really quite annoyed and sort of cornered my husband and said, look, if you're going to move, could you put the TV back? Because it's really annoying. Every morning I'm having to put the TV back into position. He said, well, I haven't moved it. I thought it was you. I thought you'd been plugging the Hoover in at the back of the. So we sort of had this moment where we were like, well, this is really weird. So we decided that it was probably the kids, and we were going to have to speak to them about it, and then we forgot. And then I went to a psychic fair, and again, it's a long story, and I won't do the rest of the details, but ended up hadn't intended at all to sit down in front of anyone for a reading, didn't actually feel the need to do it, because I'd been going to this spiritualist church and sort of felt I was getting what I needed from that, but went to this thing on my own, signed up, the last slot that this woman had available. And I remember sort of being slightly repelled, because she had this enormous sort of crystal angel on her desk, and I just thought it was really ostentatious, and I just thought, oh, I would never have picked that table, but she was the only person with anything available. I had a spare half an hour. I just stuck my name down in the slot, and I sat down, and basically she gave me probably one of the most amazing sittings of my life. And she was incredible. It was one of the I went back to her subsequently, actually about a year later, and she was very good. But often that is the way. I obviously got exactly what I needed at that point. She immediately could see Romy. She described her. She confidently said, like, you've lost a child. It's been recent. It's a daughter. This is what happened. She described the scene at the hospital incredibly accurately, things people had said to me. And then she said, I think she phrased it, she said, has furniture moved in your house? So I said, no. And she said, it has. And I said, no, it hasn't. Oh, wait a minute. Actually, there's been a thing with the TV. She said, oh, that's right. I went, oh, actually, it has. And she said, don't tell me. I'm seeing a television and it's not fixed to the wall and it's moved. And I said, well, yes, it has. And she said, well, that's your daughter. She wants you to know that she's around you and and so I had all the questions everyone else I imagine would have. But she was 5 months old. She couldn't move a television. And she said, this is energy. So I went home sort of thinking, well, I don't know. It's pretty exceptional she picked that up, but come on. But for me, the key thing was that I then slightly sheepishly told my husband what she'd said and said, like, what do you make of that? And he was like, well, I don't know. It's a bit strange. I don't know what to make of it. But it never happened again. It never happened again. And for me, bizarrely, that was actually what cemented it, because I thought, well, if this had been a thing that was being caused by something else in the house, it would have happened at some other point. The kids would have done it, or one of us would have absentmindedly plugged something in, or we would have banged against it. It never happened again. And that actually has been the hallmark of several things that have happened in that home and in this home that we now live in. And that is how I think I know that is Romy letting me know she's here. Occasionally things still move, or every time I have a moment where I was like, you know what, I put that there, and often she'll pop into my head and I'll just think, okay. And usually when I think that, the thing doesn't happen again. Often they happen 2 or 3 or 4 times and then they stop happening once you recognize it. So, but I'm really happy to hear that Sam has heard from Harley, and I know that for me that's very comforting, and I really hope that's been the same for her too.
Yes, me too. Just so people get their stories heard, can't get my head round grief. I lost my mum 6 weeks ago, and 6 weeks to the day my twin sister suddenly passed away. I'm broken.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that as well, Patrice.
Devastating loss.
I will get.
Patrice, I'm so, yeah, you have my best wishes, Patrice. I'm so very sorry to hear that.
And I've got Janet here who said, I have nothing. I've had nothing yet. So I think there was another one coming through, probably, but being to mediums, nothing come up. Come to a conclusion. He's happy where he is with family past. Maybe he will come to meet me when it's my time done. I live in hope. I'm so glad some parents have having signs to help them. Love being here with the parents, understand even though we're on a different paths. I think Jeanette said that she lost her son 19 years ago. I'm just going to get that particular one up. Oh no, so that's not Jeanette. That's somebody. Sorry, it was Jules. I do apologise getting people's stories strong and sort of popping up quite quick, so it's difficult. Yes. And Jules has the story as well. I feel guilt over losing our son 19 years ago. What if I did this? What if I did that? I don't think I'll ever stop feeling guilty. I can also remember being angry and with the world if there was a celebrity death on the news. I was like, boohoo, at least they lived until they were 70, 80, etc. I think that's so common for a lot of people as well. And I do hope I am dyslexic, so I do slightly stumble over my words, as you can probably hear. So I do apologise for that, people, as well. You mentioned death cafes, and I think that, if I got the word right, and I think that'll be really healing for people. The other thing I was if you mentioned about that, the other thing which came to me the other day is that schooling is to help children in society and life, and we're never ever taught in school really, apart from like historical figures that died, but how to talk, unless a child has died in the class and you have somebody that comes in and talks, as happened when I was at school. but you don't ever really talk about it beforehand. And how important do you think it would be also as well in schools that this is actually mentioned along with the death cafes that you can go along to as well, please?
Sure. Now death cafes, I should have done my research, because prior to COVID, sorry to mention that, trying not to say it anymore, prior to the pandemic, I was very aware of something called death cafes. I saw a flyer for one in my hometown of Brighton, and thought, what on earth is that? Like, what? And basically, what the story is a fabulous one, because I wish I could remember the man's name who started it. I'm so sorry that I can't, but if you Google death cafes, you will read about him. He was a guy who decided that we really ought to talk about death. And also highlighted the fact that in many cultures, and I'm sure we've got people watching who come from different cultures and countries and faiths and so on, but in numerous cultures around the world, death is welcomed, it's accepted, it's spoken about, it's celebrated. You think of the Dia del Muerte they have for, Day of the Dead. In Native American culture, it's accepted as a part of life. And if you take way back in our culture, in ancient times, a midwife was the wise woman of the village, and she would help the birth of babies, but she would also sit with the dying as they passed. That was her job. She helped people in, and she, sat with them as they left. But we've lost that. We've lost that in our country and our culture. And so this guy decided, it would be so great if we could just talk about death. If we even just sat down and had a cup of tea and just started talking about it, what would happen? And so that was the start of the Death Cafe, and it became a movement, and it became really massive. And I would love to see what happened to it and where it is now. Rather strangely, or not, the gentleman who started it, I think it was a year or two before the pandemic, I read that he himself had passed, actually quite a young age. I believe he was in his 40s. And I thought, well, how extraordinary. He must have had some kind of inner knowing, and what an extraordinary gift he left to the world. And so I haven't done my research. I don't know what they're doing now. I'm pretty sure they were adamant they were going to keep it running in his honor. And really, I think anyone can run one. You just contact them and say, I'd like to set one up and you basically just make some flyers and put them up and invite people to meet at a venue on a given day and time. And you can talk about death. And to lead on to your question about schools, Paul, I think that would be an amazing world if we lived in a world where we could openly talk to our children about death. I've openly talked to my children about death. I would have done anyway because of how I was brought up and the spiritual beliefs that I have. But obviously, because two of my children lost their sibling, we've had to speak about it a lot. My eldest son is on the autistic spectrum, and so he experiences the world in a slightly different way to the rest of us, and his grieving process was very different. So, we had to talk about it a lot, and that's kind of rule number one, as far as I'm concerned, in our family. We talk about stuff. We talk, if there's a problem, we talk about it. If there's something you're scared about, we talk about it. Nothing is off limits. You can talk about anything you want, because I think that's how we make connection and how we learn. And I want to send my children out in the world feeling that they are able to raise any discussion with me and with their father. But equally, I have seen, particularly in the early days after Romy died, how can I explain this without, I would never want to pass judgment on anybody, but we had a really big memorial service for her, but we decided to have a humanist ceremony because my husband and I have, crossover with our spiritual beliefs. He's very interested in Buddhism. Spiritualism is more my thing. I respect any and all religions, but we don't subscribe to one. And so we decided to have a humanist ceremony for her. And it did not escape my notice that at that time, my son was at a Church of England primary school, because we lived in a small village, and that was the school that everyone went to. And he'd only been there for a year. And I can confidently say, in fact, my mum noticed this. I didn't notice it on the day, but there was not one representative from his school, not one member of staff. Families came. And in fact, amazingly, and very, really it's very emotional for me, but many families contacted me and said, may we bring our children? Because they thought, well, perhaps if our children were there, it would be nice for them to have their friends. And that was amazing for me. I thought, yes, thank you, please, don't wear black. This is not that type of ceremony. We want to be as positive as we can and just be grateful for what we had. So, lots of families from that school community did come, and they brought their children. My daughter was at nursery. The nursery shut down and all the staff came, but not a single member of staff from that primary school attended our daughter's funeral. And I noticed, and I noticed the people who sprinted down supermarket aisles to avoid me because they had their child with them and they were going to have to explain who I was and why we were having this exchange. Still, I see that, grown adults are terrified of death and talking about death. It's as if I think we believe that if we speak about it, it might happen. And the irony is lost on us that it's going to happen anyway. It's, we're all going to die and we don't know when that's going to happen. So I would love to see a situation, and that's something I would put myself forward for. I would happily, if that's the right word, go into any school to talk about death and dying with children. But it's a minefield because of people's beliefs and because of people's upbringings and backgrounds, and it's very difficult. There was somebody that I knew of actually said, "Oh well, look, sort of said, oh well, look, let's just not tell our kids." Kind of like, let's pretend it hasn't happened, and then if they ask about Romy later, we'll say then, which I found staggering. And yeah, lots. I could go on and on. There were some very odd responses. People don't know how to deal about death anyway. But as all of the lovely bereaved parents joining in with this tonight will know, people really don't know how to deal with the death of a child at any age. They really do not know. And it would be really nice if we could educate some people actually which is partly why I wrote my book. I wrote my book for my daughter, but I also thought, you know what? I just want to tell people what it's been like for me. I want to show that I have made a conscious choice to live my life positively. And I want to, show people that I'm still alive and I still have a life to live, and I can honour my daughter by living that life in a really productive way. So a part of that, and also writing it was also saying, so let's just talk about dying. Let's talk about a child dying, because nobody wants to do that, and that's very lonely for those of us whose child has died. Because one of the things that a lot of us want to do, particularly in the early days, is talk about it. We want to talk about it.
I agree. Janet, this, because I earlier was reading it out, I lost my son in the RTA at 21, died instantly, 7 years. Damien Hodgkinson. Thank you for...
That's Jeanette. Oh, Jeanette. I'm so sorry for Damien's loss, Jeanette, and a road traffic accident. That's also incredibly traumatic.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. And if you want to just put down as because it's nice to know people's names that have died. If you want to put it down in the comments, just so everybody knows and respects, and sends love to that person as well. Feel free to, if you want to do, you can do that as well. What I was going to go, and I will get other people's messages up, so and thank you, there's quite a lot coming up, so I do apologise for the people who have said something and I haven't said anything about it, but I will go through and look at these after. But you were saying that, when we had the conversation before, that people literally would cross the street because they didn't know how to talk to you. Oh, and hello to your cat there. I think I saw your cat.
I'm just going to open a door because I think he's telling me what
absolutely.
Spider, and I think he wants to go out.
Yeah. So thank you very much for your beautiful messages coming through. No, it's absolutely fine. So you were saying that people were crossing the street from you.
Oh yeah.
Also as well, the importance as well that some people bought you food, and I know that's something that
Yes.
you like. So if you can talk about some of the really positive things that you found really helpful and know other people find helpful through your conversations with other people as well, please.
Sure. Oh yeah, the food was amazing, and so unexpected. I had not, I made a mental note, and in the years since, sadly, I have known obviously other families who have lost loved ones, and I always make a meal and turn up with a meal. It's something that you can do for somebody who, I didn't want to eat, and it certainly didn't want to cook, but I had children who did need to eat. And actually, if food just turns up on your doorstep, you eat it. And for my husband and I, we couldn't focus on anything. We couldn't read a book and watch TV. You're frightened to watch. I was frightened to watch TV for a long time because I was terrified. I never forget, actually, at that time, I believe, or not long afterwards, there was the TV series Poldark that everyone was watching, and I'd sort of dabbled in it a bit. And I remember it was very shortly after Romy died. Somebody said, "Oh, it's the final episode. You have to watch it." And I think it was the final episode. Anyway, we put this episode on, and a baby died in this episode, and that was it. I couldn't do that. I mean, it's been 8 years in July, and I can only just now sit down, and that's thanks to a fantastic bereavement therapist I've been seeing for the last year, who's a lot of things have shifted for me since then. And one of the things that I addressed was that, being terrified to watch anything unknown. I literally had to stick to romantic comedies and sort of really banal television because I was so terrified something was going to happen if it was a drama. So yeah, but anyway, I digress again. Bringing food was amazing because we couldn't settle to anything else. What that gave us was that I wasn't stuck in the kitchen. We literally just had to assemble what had been left, and people were like angels. They just left it on the doorstep and rang the doorbell. If we knew them well, they would wait and just say, "Look, I've made you this." Somebody organised it. Somebody said, "Look, they're vegetarian. The kids aren't. They don't eat this, but they eat that." Somebody had listed everything, all of our preferences, and then I think for several weeks I don't remember cooking. It just kept turning up. It was extraordinary, and the only awful part about it is I didn't know who to thank. I was so grateful. And there would just be a note, saying, "I'm so terribly sorry for your loss. Please enjoy this meal. Just leave the dirty dishes outside your door." And I couldn't bring myself to do that. I had to wash them, but there was no expectation, and that's the key, I think, and that's why it was such an immense gift and so appreciated. There was zero expectation. We didn't even have to thank the person; they were just dropping it and running, and it was a very nurturing thing to do, and it enabled my husband and I to give the kids something to eat without a big fuss, and then we could sit down at the table and eat together and cry, push the food around our plates, talk, not talk, but it gave us that space to do that, which was really incredible. But I would say that if anyone's asking, as I'm often asked actually, how to support somebody who is grieving, try to think of the things that require nothing of them, because often they cannot function, they are not functioning. If they have children, younger children, they will be forcing themselves to do the necessary for those children, but they'll be operating in some kind of strange bubble. So even that old thing that we've all done of saying to somebody like, "What can I do?" Don't even do that, because if you're asking them what you can do, that's still a pressure. You go, "Oh my God, I've got to think of something. This person wants to help me. I don't know. There's nothing you can do. What, bring my daughter back?" I mean, there's so just if there's something you think you can do it. If you don't know what to say so. Say, "I'm so sorry for," insert name of loved one if you know it, and if you don't, ask. "I'm so sorry for the loss of your son. Please, could you tell me his name?" That's a huge one. That's so massive. For me, it was so massive when somebody actually stopped and said, what's her name?" and then would use her name. That was amazing, because a lot of people's response, they go into it, it's often shock. They're not expecting you to say that your child's died, and oh my God, they think they can't ask any questions. So try to think of something that requires minimal effort from the bereaved person or family. Show up or write a note, put a note through the door and say, I would love to have your children round to my house. Here's my number. Please let me know. These are the days I'm free. Let me know anytime you would like some quiet time, and I will happily have your kids. I will feed them. A friend, my dear friend Jen, did that for me several times, actually. And I trusted her, and she just turned up and said, can I take the kids out for the day? And I said, thank you, that would be great. So they didn't have to sit in the house with me crying. They got to go and play with their friends. And, I had a day where I had some space to grieve. So, yeah, giving the person some space in which to grieve is valuable. But just listening and even saying, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say to you. I feel so terribly for you. I don't have the words. I'm sorry. Just saying that, or offer them a hug if they would like one. It's often very simple things, actually, but don't avoid them. Don't not mention their loved one's name. Don't carry on pretending it didn't happen. Don't say things like, and I did hear this really so many times, oh, I'm so sorry for you. I know exactly how you feel because, my dad died 10 years ago. I'm so sorry that you lost your father. I can't identify with that because my father's still alive. It's like, so if you're obviously in this forum, we're all sharing our stories because that's what we're here to do. But in a situation where you're just chatting with somebody you don't know very well, and the subject of their grief comes up, don't attempt to identify with it. As somebody, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name, but as somebody mentioned in their message earlier, actually, I can't remember how you phrased it, but it was really well put about how we all have our own grief stories. We're all having our own experience of grief. I thought that was very eloquent and very true.
I'll try and find it in the messages here. Claire has put, it was my father's funeral yesterday. I am a lost soul, currently sat with funeral flowers round me. I'm broken, wish I got to say goodbye, but he passed suddenly. That's
So
always
sorry,
shocking.
Claire. Yeah, it's very shocking. I'm sorry, Claire. That's a terrible shock. And I understand that sentiment. I count myself to be very privileged that I got to sit with my daughter as she died, which, some people find odd. But people, particularly the recently bereaved, understand that because that does feel like something that is important for us to do. And I've often asked myself, what would I have done? How would I be behaving if I weren't with Romy when she died? And I think I would have put myself in a place where I could feel a connection with her, or even imagine that I feel a connection to her. So for me, we live on the coast, so I would go perhaps to a not so crowded stretch of beach and stand by the sea for a little while and have some sort of moments to contemplate her and our connection, and just kind of I go to the burial ground, which is a natural burial ground, so it's sort of like a wooded area. I go there when I feel the need to sort of feel close to her. There's a beautiful, I really feel I should mention actually, the Harry Edwards Healing Sanctuary for anyone in the south of England. It's in Burrows-Lee, which is sort of the Surrey area. And they're extraordinary. They have this extraordinary facility. Anyone can go. You can have some healing if you would like it, but you don't have to. You can just go and enjoy the grounds. And actually, my husband and I drove there, and a couple of times it was the summer, we just lay outside on the grass. We just lay on the grass. And just it has a beautiful feeling. For some people, it's a church. For other people, it's sitting in their garden. I did make an area of our garden, specifically for Romy, and the children she has a bench with her name on and some rose bushes, and the children often like to go and sit and have a ice lolly or whatever on her bench. So thinking of Claire and the terrible state of shock that she must feel in, and that awful feeling of having things still that they want to say, I would encourage you, Claire, if you can, to say them. You know, even sitting out loud in your living room with your dad's funeral flowers, because I do believe that he can hear you in some way, and I would encourage you to speak to him, whether it's in your head or out loud, whether you go to a beautiful place where you feel peaceful to do that, or whether you're just doing it in your kitchen while you're washing up. I don't think it makes any difference. But talk to them, because I really do think I think something happens when you do that.
I fully agree with you there as well. Charles read, I lost my son 15 years ago, and people have asked me why I haven't cried, but I couldn't tell them that I have had a NDE. So I'm happy because he was drug addicted, and I know he's fine.
Wow.
Do you find people that have had a near-death experience kind of have a different attitude towards loved ones that have died to those that haven't had a near-death experience?
Yes, I think they do, and I think that's because they have the understanding that actually there isn't anything to fear about death. You know, we're not writhing in agony. Well, we might be for seconds, but even then, I believe I understand that the soul has already sort of detached itself from the physical body at that point. And so, for anyone who is struggling with the idea that their loved one who perhaps died, like the lady who lost her son in a road traffic accident, for example, you know, in a shocking or sort of violent way, I personally believe, from the years of study I have done, that at some point in the process, the soul has already sort of started to leave the body. And so, you know, I can imagine that there's a lot of angst about, you know, whether our loved one may have felt, you know, literally died in agony. I like to think that's not really as much, it's not how we imagine it. It's not how we see it in films. I haven't had a near-death experience, but I did have an extraordinary experience at the burial ground, where Romy is actually one, even perhaps more than that, was the one I had a strange dream, is what I can describe it as. But it's still, when I think about it now, it's as vivid as when I had it. And I had a bizarre dream where I could hear a voice talking to me, and I felt like I was under the water. And I was trying to tune into the voice, and it sounds very familiar. And I suddenly realized that actually the voice was mine. It was my own voice I could hear. And it was, you know, like when you're in a swimming pool when you're a kid and you go under the water and you can hear everyone sort of, you can hear bits of conversation and sounds. And that's what it sounded like. And I was straining to hear. And as I listened, I could hear basically the words that I had said to Romy as she passed. I have remembered those words. They're very clear in my mind. I know what they are. I know exactly what I said. And in this dream, I was hearing my own voice saying these words, and I felt like I was under the water. And then suddenly I felt myself in the dream come up out of the water really quickly and sort of like a superhuman. And I felt that I was going up, but I didn't know where to. It was and the feeling. I mean, I've tried so hard to find the words. Exhilaration, elation. It's like nothing. No word I can think of does it justice. It's the biggest high you could possibly imagine. I felt that for like 2 seconds, and then it was gone. The whole thing was gone. And I woke up. I woke my husband up, and I said, "I know what it's like to die." Those are I just knew. I am convinced that dream was that the previous 2 days I had been really wallowing in the idea that Romy had been in pain. I'd been desperately worried that she'd been in some kind of pain, and I didn't know. And I didn't know I was like, well, what happened to her? Like, did it hurt? Is she all right? I had all of those questions, and I truly believe that she was somehow able to show me what that moment of her passing was like and what it feels like for your soul to leave your body. And you know, for me, that wasn't a near-death experience, but when I woke up the next morning, I didn't have a huge fear of death, before then, and I'm sure a lot of other bereaved parents would identify with this when I say that actually, if you've lost a child, your fear of death diminishes greatly, because if you have any kind of belief system which leads you to think that you might be reunited with your loved ones after death, then, you know, obviously then you start to fear death a lot less. But when I woke up that morning, my fear of death, I thought, if that's what it's like, then, you know, what are we all making such a fuss about? It was a beautiful experience. It was a beautiful experience. So I'm sorry, I forget the gentleman's name. I'm sorry, who posted about his
I think
his
it
son
was
and his
Charles. I think it was Charles.
Charles.
Do correct me if I'm wrong. Let's see if I can
Yeah,
find it again.
I'd like to say I'm sorry for your loss, Charles, but I'm also I'm glad for you that you have had a near-death experience, and that perhaps that's given you a level of understanding that might help you in your grieving process. I hope that it does.
Sam said, I slept at the funeral home next to Harley as I couldn't leave him. I read his books to him and held him and said, Mummy, sorry I couldn't save you, and Mummy will get justice. I know that you had, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you did like a birthday cake for Romy.
Yes.
And the importance of doing that, because I think sometimes people sort of feel, well, I can't do that now, but the importance
Right.
it was for you and your family, please.
Sure. Yeah, I still do it every year. It's I have a few rituals. That's one of them. Every year on her birthday, I bake her a cake. I bake all my kids their birthday cakes. It gets me into a lot of trouble because at a certain age they start requesting things like, "Can I have an airport or a or a cruise liner, or can I have a massive fairy princess castle?" And it really stretches my baking creativity. I'm not a bake-off contestant. So it's very simple cake. But I make one every single year. Also for me, I write her name on it with the icing. That's important because for the first year, I actually signed her name in cards. And at that point, I really didn't care how crazy that made me look. I was compelled to do it. And strangely, my eldest son, who has autism, also did that. He would write, when I said, "Oh, could you sign this birthday card for Grandad?" He would write his name, and then he would always write Romy's name. And I let him, I was like, you know what? And he said, "Well, Mummy, is that wrong?" And I said, "No, of course not. If you want to see her name written down, you write it down." And for me, yeah, I write that name on a cake every year. And we take it to her because her birthday is the end of March, so it's generally quite a nice spring day. We've been very lucky with weather, and we go as a family. I give the kids the option, they go if they want to, and don't if they don't want to. And we take the cake up there, and we light candles, and we sing happy birthday, and we sit and eat cake by her resting place, which it's for us. It's a lovely experience, and I think it's important to have rituals where our loved ones are. I was kind of inspired, by how the Mexicans do it with Dia del Muerte, to do things ritualistically, which bring our loved ones who have passed in as part of our lives. My kids all talk about her, even my son who wasn't born when she died. They all talk about her, not obsessively, but it's as if, it's every now and again her name comes up because she's part of our family, and that's what I've taught them to do. But it's very important. I buy her roses every week. The desk that I write at, the desk that I work at, always have my husband bought me a beautiful vase, which is very special, and I always have roses in there for her. And I visit her resting place. I used to go every week religiously, and then I felt the need to go a little less, mainly because I had then a newborn, and it was difficult in the bad weather. But we go always for her birthday and anniversary, and I go whenever I feel like I want to just take a moment out and have some peace. But yeah, I think rituals are important, and for people with older children or loved ones who have passed, that might be something that you used to enjoy doing with them. I would say keep doing it. Even if it makes you feel sad, sometimes it's good. It enables you. In fact, it was Charles, I think, who said people have asked him why he hasn't cried. Sometimes we don't feel that we need to, or sometimes it takes a different type of connection to allow the tears to come.
Jules said here, your daughter's name is beautiful, Romy. I apologise if I spelt her name wrong. So,
Oh, thank you,
has she
Jules.
spelt
Thank you.
Romy right, or is it with a Y?
It is with a Y, but
Yeah.
I don't care. It's like, thank you, Jules. I appreciate your message. That's beautiful.
So your book, you write a blog for Romy. It's been written. It's up on your website as well.
Mm.
Can you say how people can get hold of your books? I know it is sold through Amazon, but if there's any other ways of people getting hold of the book, and how also people can get in contact with you if they want to either book you for a talk or hear more about your story, if you can mention about that, please.
Sure. So yeah, my book, The Truth Inside, it is available on Amazon. It's probably the easiest way to get it. It is stocked in bookshops. I confess, I still go into my local Waterstones to have a quick peep in the Mind, Body, Spirit section, and it is in there. So it does pop up. Occasionally, somebody will send me a photo, like, oh look. It does pop up in bookshops, but probably the easiest way, and I'm reluctant to say it, is Amazon. Obviously, a local bookshop would be best. What were the other things? So yes, they want to get hold of me. I do have a website. It's alinorell.com. Norell is 1 R and 2 L's. Perhaps there's something in your, on your YouTube or something, Paul, where it has the spelling of my name, because it does, does confuse people.
I'll put a link to your website in the
Thank
description.
you. My website does require some updating, but I believe there is a contact link on there. If not, I will. I think you have my email, so if you want to maybe put my email, you could put my email on your
Okay.
on your link there, and I would be happy. I would try, if you have a burning question you would like to ask me, please do email, and I will try my best. I will apologise in advance if, in the unlikely event that there are like 6 million email questions, I'm not going to be able to answer them all, but I will really try my best to reply if you would like to ask me a question or email me with anything.
If I find your email, because I know I've got it, and then put it, I'm not sure if I can put it at the bottom actually. No, I have to put it in afterwards, because I can't share my own posts,
Right,
unfortunately,
okay.
which is a real shame. So let's have a look at what else we've got. Is there anything else you want to say about that before I get somebody else's question?
To book, happy to talk, do talks, anything like that. I've got fairly young kids, so it's challenging to travel. So I need some advance notice, basically. But also, happy to do things online. I'm actually beginning to use my writing now as a way. I'm hoping my way forward is going to be somehow with writing and through tarot. I just was saying to you, Paul, wasn't I, before we went live, that I've sort of found myself being really dragged back into that world that I really thought I wasn't going to engage with in that way again. But so I'm sort of starting to find a way with that. I'm developing a workshop, hopefully to work with bereavement and with people who are grieving. And in line with that, I'm hoping to do some very basic psychotherapy and counselling courses to really allow me to work in that area. It's an area that I feel very passionate about for obvious reasons. As somebody said earlier in the chat, we bereaved parents need a forum. We need to speak to each other, and we also collectively need to help other people to understand how to live alongside us, I think. Would be the right term, because we do still have lives that we are living, very valid lives and purposeful lives, and if people can just understand how to navigate some of the challenges that we face, continuing to live our lives without our children, or in fact loved ones of any description. For those people here who've, obviously several people have mentioned they've recently lost parents, which is not an experience I have had yet, but obviously I'm going to have it at some point, and I can empathize and I can understand how devastating that loss will be. So we just need to talk about it, I think, talking about death and dying and respecting everybody's beliefs. Some of us will believe there's something that comes after, others believe that the curtain goes down and it's all a big black hole. I will respect anybody's thoughts, but my main my main driver is really to help other people to continue living their lives in a positive and purposeful way, because I don't really think there's much value in continuing a life where you're never going to feel any happiness again. When you've lost a child in particular, your happiness is always slightly tinged with something else. But I can very confidently and truthfully say that, you know, I do laugh and I do find joy in my life. And I, you know, largely do that for Romy, because I think, well, it feels disrespectful to her not to. You know, I'm her mother and I always want to set my kids an example, you know.
That's lovely. Charles said your work is extremely helpful for people. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Charles. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sam said earlier, if I can find it here. Oh yeah, Sam said she will purchase your book.
Thank you, Sam.
The other one here is Harley's younger brother plays with Harley and has seen him in the bedroom on his bed. He says, Harley, stop jumping on the bed. I'm trying to sleep.
Ah, so beautiful. Yeah, see, children, I don't know how old your younger son is actually, but when children, they often say that children before the age of 7 have a much greater awareness, and that starts to diminish after the age of 7. Up to 4, they say that children can possibly recall previous lives, if that's something. I know that's an area that interests you greatly, Paul, that you've worked in. But yeah, and that's a story for another time. But my youngest son, absolutely, I could write a book on the experiences I had with him before the age of 4, where I'm absolutely convinced he's been here before, and I think I could tell you exactly who he was. It's extraordinary.
Also, as well, which I was going to say, which kind of mentions onto a couple of questions other people have mentioned here, but you've, correct me if I'm wrong, seen Romy as if she's grown up. Have I got that right?
Yes.
And can you tell
Yes.
about that, please, for people?
Yeah, that's correct. I for me, it's a fine line. And obviously, I work with mediumship. I do work clairvoyantly when I have given sittings and where I have when I say see, I see. So it for me, the way I describe it is as if the space in front of my forehead here, if I close my eyes, this space here is like a cinema screen, and I can see scenes on it like I'm watching a film. And then if I actually see an individual who has passed, very often that will come at me from the right or the left side, and I will get the impression of a face. Excuse me. So I will often, or I will notice something significant about them, like a piece of jewelry that they might wear, or I see them wearing a particular color, and that's usually denoting something that was important to them during their lifetime. And when I've seen Romy, still, I speak like this, and yet still I question. I always question. Am I imagining this? Am I sitting here imagining, oh, what would she be looking like now? What would her hair be like? And but it happens frequently enough, and in random situations enough that I can pretty confidently say that I'm pretty sure I do see her, and it is always around the age that she would be now. If she were here now, she would have just turned 8. And I don't know. I don't think my imagination is that good. I saw it when I was pregnant with my youngest son, just before I was sure I was pregnant, but I kind of felt that I was. I had a sort of a vision. I saw a woman, I don't know who she was, holding a baby, and I knew it was a boy. And standing next to her, holding her hand, was a little girl who would have been about, 12 or 13 months old. She was just walking. And this, I'm sure, would have been Romy. And in recent times, I've seen, often just out of the corner of my eye, just a flash, and I see it, and it's gone. And I think, that's her. I see the height. I see the hair. I do. Always at the age she would be if she was still here.
Sam says Harley is with his big sister, who would be 10
now.
And Harley was 3 when he passed. His younger brother is now 5, because you're saying how old his brother is.
Yes, so yes, exactly that age at which they tend to have that consciousness. That's beautiful.
We are coming towards the end of tonight's, so I will ask just a couple more questions, and I'd like to thank you, Ali, for, I think it's been so incredibly helpful and healing, and also I'll give people hope, which I think is so important. I'll ask this question now, but what's some of the lovely feedback you've had from people that have either bought your book, say through Amazon, or I know when we met you were doing your book tour, so you were doing a talk about it. You spoke in Watkins, the Isborne, and quite a few other places around the UK. So what some feedback you've had from the book, or feedback that was been given to you whilst you've been signing someone's book, if you can say something, but you're allowed to share or able to share as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, definitely the ones that stick with me are always very much like the lovely people that I've connected with here this evening, where,
Thank you.
often people will share with you that they've lost either a child or a loved one. There was one lady in particular who had also lost a baby daughter, and had been in a really terrible place that I know very well. Her loss had actually been, it had preceded mine. So she'd lost her daughter before I'd lost Romy. And she had written to me to say how, she was actually, for the first time in however many years it had been, had actually started to think about her grief in a different way, and was feeling like there was some hope, which was, that's an amazing thing to hear. And it's a cliche, but when I wrote The Truth Inside, I do remember I said, look, if it just helps one person to want to live when they've lost their child, then that is my daughter's legacy. That's what I really felt when I came to write it. As is often the case with these things, I feel that actually Romy herself gave me a gift. Because I had always wanted to write as a child. My big dream when I was a child was to write books, and I didn't pursue that, didn't go down that route. And actually, through writing the blog, it's a whole series of sort of events stacked up on each other. My blog came first, and then somebody who read the blog sort of said to me, "You should write a book." And as a consequence of writing that book, I then did an MA level creative writing course, and now I'm just completing my first novel, which has had some interest. So, I always feel that obviously I would give anything to have Romy with me, but that can't happen. And I do feel that she kind of handed me this gift. In writing about her, I've opened up a life for myself that didn't exist before. I'm, privileged to do something that I love, and also to use that writing skill to help people to overcome their grief. That's something amazing that has come out of it. And yeah, people tell you, it's a privilege. It's a privilege, actually, in many ways, to be a bereaved parent in particular, particularly when you've chosen to speak publicly about your loss, because I then find myself privileged to hear other people's stories, and to say their loved ones' names with them. And, that to me is a really, really important part of why I do this. It helps to help me feel alive. And that's what I would want for anyone else. It's really important, as you say, hope. It's really important that we have hope. It's really important that we're alive and living an actual life, because our children would be devastated to see us operating as shells. And I did that for a long time, and I really struggled to get myself out of that. So writing was the thing that saved me. And for I've met other people who've said it's painting or whatever, but yes, and I met somebody else who suffered a loss of a parent, actually, and was really, really struggling with it. And she, my suggestion, and I did a workshop with her, and she began to write about how she felt, and discovered that she really loved to write poetry. And to be able to give these gifts to people and to help them to open up what's already there is really huge.
That's lovely. Sam, there's just a couple I'm going to read out. Sam, my son Harley died in 2018 and my daughter Skylar in 2012. Sending a big hug to you, Sam, and I will
Bless
be
you,
contacting
Sam.
you.
I'm so sorry. It's two incredibly tough losses. I'm so sorry.
Lorna, thank you both for tonight. It was really enlightening, especially in what you say and do that is helpful to the parents and what not to say and do. Absolutely. Thank you for the raw honesty of sharing your experience. Yeah,
No,
thank you
it's my pleasure.
so
Thank
much.
you, Donna.
Sending gentle hugs to everyone with their own personal grief. Is there anything that you would like to say? Because we only sort of really touching the surface of the book, your experiences. But is there anything that you feel is really, really important, Ali, that I haven't asked you in this evening at all?
I think I've said it already, but what comes to mind when you ask me that question, really, and thinking about, all the beautiful souls in this group who've, some of whom have shared their stories and their loved ones with us and their names, and others who have not, but have obviously been listening and understanding and feeling. I do come back to this idea of, I feel very strongly it's important to say to people, you know what, talk to them. It doesn't matter if you believe they can hear you or not. It doesn't matter if you pray or you don't pray, or you go to the church or you don't go to a church, or you've never, for the lady who's, lives in hope of having a sign from her son. It doesn't matter. Talk to them. Just talk to them, because for me, that helped me to release a lot of the things that I wanted to say. I still do it now because my situation was, I had a very young daughter who, part of my grief is all the imagining of all the milestones that I've missed and the things that she would be doing and should be doing. And it's not fair that she's not doing them. And so that's the root of my anger when it comes. But I find it really helpful. I talk to her all the time when I'm on my own, out loud, in my head. And I do feel that fosters some kind of connection, and it helps me. And also, crucially, I think grief is a very lonely place to be, even if you're surrounded by, wonderful loved ones and family who all want to support you. It's immensely lonely, and particularly if you've lost a child. I think, only those of us who are in that situation understand exactly how lonely it is. And so, talk to your child, because I really believe they can hear you. And to the lady who is waiting for a sign from your son, I am absolutely sure you will get one. And sometimes it's the things that you think aren't actually a thing. So if you think about what happened with my television, if I hadn't actually sought that medium out, I would have carried on thinking that was, I banged into the television, or the cat had done it, or the kids had done it. So very often it's the things that we're very well trained to tell ourselves not to be stupid, and that can't possibly have happened. So when you find yourself in a situation where you've thought about your loved one, and around the time you've been thinking about your loved one, something like that has happened, and you've immediately dismissed it and gone, oh, don't be stupid, stop yourself and think about it, because actually that could be the sign that you were waiting for. And very often that's how they come, in my experience.
Thank you, Ali. Sam says you're an inspirational lady. God bless you and your family.
And to you, Sam, thank you.
Sam says, brilliant night, guys. We need more of this. Jeanette agreed. And, and Jules, I think the Death Cafe is a fantastic idea. I'm going to see if there's one in my idea. I think it's a fantastic idea as well. Thank you so much for sparing your time tonight. I know you've helped a lot of people watching here, and I'd like to really thank you for your time. Do you want to just give your website out, and again, any extra details just before we go?
Sure. So it is alinorell.com. That's ALINORELL. So yeah, try the contact. I'm saying that, and as I'm saying it, I'm thinking, no, there was a thing where the emails weren't coming through from the website. So just perhaps Paul, they would be able to make contact with you
Yes,
through the podcast, and you can pass on if necessary. But yeah, my website is there. My book is The Truth Inside. And yeah, any questions that find their way to me, I will do my absolute best to provide some kind of coherent response to any of them. And just sending my love to everyone, and thank you for spending your time talking to me, and thank you to everyone who spent their evening listening to me.
Thank you. I'll pin your email at the top so people will be able to get in contact
Great.
with you that way. Thank you, everybody. I'll say good night now. You want just to stay on just literally 5 minutes, because I know
Sure.
it's gone 10 o'clock, so I won't keep you a very long time, but
No
just to
problem.
say thank you for everything.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone, and see you all again
Right.
soon.